Let's wrap up Black History Month by talking about an exceptional dancer, a brilliant choreographer, and an artistic visionary whose work changed the landscape of modern dance, Alvin Ailey.
Hold on, keep your eyes on the prize.
Welcome back to Yesterqueers. My name's Amanda, and I'm a public historian of queer history. Alvin Ailey was born at the height of the Great Depression, 1931, in rural Texas. His parents separated when he was about 2, so he and his mother Lula moved around quite a lot. His strongest memories are of working with her in the cotton fields, starting when he was about 4, and of sneaking out at night to watch the adults dance at the local honky-tonk. Eventually, Ailey and his mother moved to Los Angeles, and the city was a revelation for a 12-year-old boy from Texas. He took gymnastics and sang in the Glee Club at school. He saw performances by people like Duke Ellington and Billie Holiday, and in 1946 he attended his first dance concert, a school field trip to see the Ballet Russe de Monte Carlo. He was hooked by the idea of dance concerts, having only ever seen people dance for fun, in church, or as part of a larger musical act. It was also in Los Angeles that Ailey first realized he was gay while he was in high school. Duke University professor Thomas DeFrance writes of that revelation, like many young gay men eager to corral the sensual impulses of the body, he turned to dance study. Ailey tried tap, ballet, and a few other styles, but none of them really resonated. He didn't get serious about studying dance until he was 18, when his friend Carmen de Lavallade brought him to a class at Lester Horton's studio. The dynamic modern dance technique that Horton developed, which emphasizes strength, flexibility, extension, and fluid motion, is foundational to Alvin Ailey's choreography. Still, Ailey wouldn't commit to dancing professionally because he didn't think there was a future for a black male dancer. He studied with Horton periodically while also studying writing and French at UCLA and at San Francisco State. And while he was in San Francisco, he spent some time doing a nightclub act called Al and Rita with Maya Angelou, who danced and sang calypso in the 1950s. He finally joined Horton's company full-time in the spring of 1953, and by November of that year, he found himself as its choreographer and artistic director when Horton died suddenly in the middle of their season. He was the least experienced dancer and brand new to the company, but no one else wanted to do it, so he stepped up. And thus began Alvin Ailey's career as a choreographer. By 1958, Ailey was in New York, fresh off a Broadway show called Jamaica. He founded what is now called the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater because he wanted to continue the work that he started at Horton. Their first performance was on March 30th, 1958. 2 years later, when he was just 29, Ailey debuted what would become his most popular, influential, and critically acclaimed work, Revelations, which tells the history of Black America through the lens of the church. It's estimated that Revelations has been seen by more people than any other dance created in the 20th century. Ailey talked a lot about his pieces being an expression of blood memories, and choreographer Rennie Harris describes Ailey's dancers as physical historians, and I just love that. Alvin Ailey didn't want to be just one thing, so some of his pieces are just dynamic and fun, but some of them are steeped in memory. Like a 1968 piece set to Hugh Masekela's music that draws a searing parallel between apartheid South Africa and violence in Chicago in the 1960s. In 1961, the State Department invited Ailey's company to tour Australia and Southeast Asia as part of JFK's program of cultural presentations. You know how the destruction of USAID has led to a lot of conversations about America's soft power and winning hearts and minds around the world? Well, we don't just do that with vaccines and food, we also do it with cultural exchange, or at least we used to. By the mid-60s, the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater was very popular overseas, but still struggling to book tours in the US. So Ailey stuck it out, but he hated working with the government. Not only did the State Department insist on calling his company an ethnic troupe as opposed to a modern dance company, they were also closely monitored by the FBI, especially Ailey since he was gay. The FBI referred to Ailey's sexuality as his lewd and criminal tendencies, and repeatedly threatened to bankrupt the company if he did anything flamboyant or overtly homosexual while on tour. The State Department tours, along with Ailey's hustling for residencies and grants, kept the lights on, and once he retired from dancing in 1965, he turned the full force of his creative energy to choreographing, but it was not an easy path. In 1970, Ailey announced that he was closing the company due to a lack of bookings, but the State Department actually stepped in to save them and sent them on a tour of North Africa, followed by a tour of Russia as part of a cultural exchange program. The Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater was the first modern dance company ever to perform in the Soviet Union, and they were a huge hit. Their performances were televised to more than 22 million people, and on the last night of their tour, they did 30 curtain calls. When the company returned to New York, buoyed by their monstrously successful tour of Russia, they sold out a 2-week run at the August Wilson Theater, which included the debut of a new piece called Flowers, inspired by Janis Joplin's life and sudden death. Finally, more than a decade after he founded it, Alvin Ailey's company was both successful and profitable. Ailey spent the next 10 years immersing himself in the work. He choreographed more than 100 pieces for his company, though he always insisted that performances also include pieces by other choreographers. His life was, by all accounts, almost completely consumed by work, and he kept his work life and his private life entirely separate. He had a close circle of friends, but even they felt like they were sometimes being kept at arm's length, and Ailey had no long-term relationships to speak of. He wasn't out publicly, and having a partner would have complicated his life significantly. In 1980, the stress, the undiagnosed mental illness he'd been managing, and the sudden and lonely death of his friend Joyce took their toll, and Ailey had a psychotic break. He was actually arrested for assaulting a security guard and sent to Bellevue Hospital for a psychiatric evaluation. He spent several weeks undergoing inpatient psychiatric care, after which he emerged with the diagnosis of bipolar disorder. And then he went back to work, albeit not at the same punishing pace. Over the course of his career, Alvin Ailey became one of the most beloved choreographers and artistic directors in history. But of course, he had his critics. Before Alvin Ailey, modern dance was seen as this lofty, avant-garde art form populated by true artists who didn't care about fame or audience size and only wanted to be recognized for their art. Not everyone loved that he was bringing it to the masses. In 1969, dance critic Marcia B. Siegel wrote this scathing takedown of Ailey's commercialism, and it needled at him for years. When asked about it in 1973 interview, he said, "The black pieces we do that come from blues, spirituals, and gospels are part of what I am. They are as honest and truthful as we can make them. I'm interested in putting something on stage that will have a very wide appeal without being condescending. What do people mean when they say we're Broadway? If it's art and entertainment, thank God. That's what I want to be." Alvin Ailey received the Kennedy Center Honor for his lifetime contribution to American culture on December 4th, 1988. He was lauded by President Reagan at the reception before the show. And on December 1st, 1989, Alvin Ailey died of AIDS at the age of 58. He asked that his official cause of death be announced to the press as complications from a blood disorder. He didn't want his mother or the dance company to suffer the stigma associated with HIV and AIDS. That's it for today. As always, more information, including sources and further reading, is available in the usual place.